A very warm good evening, everyone. Now that we have quite a few people who have tuned in with us, I feel we're officially ready to begin today's episode of the Conquer podcast. First of all, a very warm welcome to today's episode of the Conquer podcast. And I'm so happy that so many of you have joined in to hear about the amazing conversation that we're about to have, and that you've made this decision to wrap up your weekend in the best way possible, because we're going to talk about some really amazing things right now. And when it comes to the word conquer, you guys must know by this point how precious that word is to me. And I really like the way the word sounds, because just think about it. The word conquer doesn't really box you into a certain gender, it doesn't limit your achievements, and it doesn't just define a moment, but rather it defines a mindset. And that's exactly the type of people that I love to speak to on the Conquer podcast. People who are not just conquering on the stage, but rather in life itself as well. The other day, I was reading this beautiful quote, and it said that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but rather our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. I love such beautiful quotations, which talk about the contrast of mindset that just exists. And it is our light that frightens us the most and not our darkness. This quote gave me so much to think about. And when I was getting to know our wonderful guest today, I feel that these words perfectly describe her. And in fact, I'm going to list just some of the achievements of today's guest. Let's get to know her a little bit until she's ready to join us here. To just name a few of the achievements of today's amazing guest, she graduated valedictorian. She obtained 2 degrees in business and finance too. And not just that, she has also completed online business programs from Harvard as well as the Tuck Business School. She's also an award winning Toastmasters public speaker, as well as she was also on the Forbes 30 under 30 scholars list. And this is just a few of her achievements. She has accomplished so much in life. And I am super excited to have our wonderful guest join us in just a couple of minutes. Hello, hey, hi, Dervy. How are you? I'm
Hello,
doing
how are you
amazing,
doing?
and I've been looking forward to our conversation since yesterday, since we spoke as well. How was church?
Amazing. Church was good. So, everyone, I just got back from church, which is why we're running a few minutes behind. And it's Mother's Day. So, the message really focused on encouragement like, hey, sometimes you're thriving in life, and sometimes you're not. Like, how do you reconcile those two parts of life? And then, how do you also remember, like, the promises God has had for you? What has God said towards you, towards your life? And recognizing that at the end of the day, it all works out. So there's a Bible verse that says, all things work together for the good of those who love God. So it was a good reminder. So I'm glad I went to church today in person. It's been a busy weekend, but I always, I prioritize my relationship with God. I prioritize taking time to really make time for those things that matter. Even when life gets busy, even being with New Jersey, USA, it doesn't mean like I stop praying or like going to church. It's like now you need to go to church. Now you really need to make sure that your source is really the
That is so
center.
well put. And I was so happy to see, how you just balance your work as well as your personal life. Nothing seems to phase you despite like your calendar is so jam-packed these days. But yeah, I love that you have that clarity in your head that, everything deserves its own time block in my calendar. And especially with Mother's Day, I feel that message was beautiful. So yeah, and again, officially a very warm welcome to the Conquer podcast, and thank you so much for taking out your time and being one of our first international guests on this podcast as well.
So much. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm excited for the conversation. I see people are already making some comments in the chat. It's gonna be a great one.
Thank
So
you for
thank you so
coming on
much.
board. So, a huge congratulations, Ravi, once again for winning the title of Miss New Jersey USA 2023. Now that you've gotten time to, wrap your head around the whole moment, how does it feel? Has it sunk in yet?
I don't know that it ever sinks in yet, which is something I'm grateful for because I feel like it keeps you just always excited and saying like, wow, I did that, that happened to me, or it just gives you that moment to be grateful for. So if I'm ever in a point in time where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to be grateful for, I'm like, no, you have a lot to be grateful for. So it's been great. I'm so excited. 2 months, they say time flies when you're having fun. This is the definition of it. Time really does fly because a lot has been happening in 2 months. And I'm just really honored and excited that New Jersey would choose me to represent the state. So I'm super excited, I'm honored, and I don't take it for granted. We're gonna do a lot
I
of
am
great
looking
work this
forward to
year.
your reign. In fact, I know that, I was watching your crowning moments the other day, and it brought me to tears because of like your winning reaction. It was so precious, and you could really see, we're going to talk about that part of your story as well, how this was not your first time competing. And I want to dive into those details. But before that, for our viewers who might not know, the backstory of Dervy, who is now the queen, would you love to, just tell our viewers a little bit about what was life like and, a little bit of your childhood and when you came to the States as an 18-year-old, what dreams did you really have for
Yeah.
yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was born in the US, but I grew up in Nigeria. My whole family is Nigeria. Love Nigeria. I don't know if anybody who watched my story yesterday, I got to be the MC for the Nigerian Healthcare Foundation Gala. I had so much fun. And anytime I have to represent my culture, you can count on me to represent that. But I grew up in Nigeria. I'm just trying to think. Lagos, Nigeria. Simple life, nothing crazy. I have four amazing siblings. My parents, my mom passed away a few years ago, so rest in peace. Um, for us back then, it was just the simplicity of life. Life has actually become more complex. Just generally with technology and everything. Back then, it was like you do your chores, you go to school, you play with your neighbors. It was really simple, and I was always excited. I was always in the midst of elders, listening to their conversation, even when I didn't know what they were talking about. I was always asking questions. So you can count on me to be asking questions. Why are we doing this? Why does this make sense? And for me, I was just always curious. So anything that would drive that curiosity, I was game for. And one memory I have growing up is I was always the person to greet people. Like when I say greet people, I'm like, oh, hey, how are you doing? Good morning. Till
Mm.
today. Like even at work, before I email somebody about something, I'm like, hey, good morning. How's your weekend? And some people are not like that. They're like, hey, do you have the documents? I'm like, oh, hey, good morning. I do. That was just something I always did, and people remembered me for that. And for me, it was just like the simple things of life. So, like coming to the US in 2015, I was, I think, 16, turning 17, almost 17 when I got to the US. And honestly, I was going to college. I just wanted to like get my degrees. And I remember just always having this thing on my heart about spreading the family name, expanding the family name, and I didn't know what that meant. And I knew that eventually I'll figure out what that meant. But for me, it was like going somewhere different, going, not always taking the path that has been traveled. So charting my own path. That was always something that always came up. So I was going to school in Kentucky. So I went to Berea College in Kentucky. And I like to joke that I have no relationship with the Kentucky Derby because my name is Derby. It was like, no, I'm not from Kentucky. And I went there. So I studied economics and business. um for me, 3 weeks into college, I got bored. I was like, is this the American dream that everybody talks about? And he was like, um of course you're in Kentucky, so it can't be the American dream, or maybe it is. But then I started challenging myself. Okay, let's try different things. Let's meet people, let's be in community. And that's when I started like really growing. So for me, ultimately, it was to have a great college experience, a different kind of college experience beyond going to class. And I went to a work study, so I
Mm.
did work as a student. And it was just trying new things, like what have you not seen? What have you not seen someone in your family accomplish? What does that look like? That was where my head was at. And just always like learning from people, trying different things, helping people. Pageants were not in my radar. Even though I had the opportunity to do something for one of the Kentucky pageants as a teen, it was just a lot. I was like, hey, I just came from Nigeria. I got no money. My family is not here. And pageants are a lot. You need a whole support system to go through. So that was Derby. I just really just wanted to do things. And then I found I love to travel. So I'll travel a lot as a student. I'll meet people. For me, it was all about connectivity. How can I connect people? Connect with people, connect with ideas, connect with experiences, and use that to elevate. Because I believe that we should always be going to the next level. So that was the path. That was Pageants were not in my radar. But I tell people I used to watch Next Top Model as a kid. I probably watched maybe one or two Miss Worlds because Nigeria also has a Miss World winner from the 90s. Or like it was not like a thing that I saw like, oh, you're gonna do pageants. But people always ask me, are you a model? Right from when I was 15 or 16, it was either like, oh, you're tall, are you a model, or it was my natural hair, which was an interesting part of my whole story. So quickly, like growing up, I have what they call like 4C hair. Basically, it's really hard, it's really coarse, and my mom didn't want her kid crying, so we would perm the hair just to make it softer, so that it could be easy to comb. But for my situation, an hour later, it was back to 4C, and I remember going to the salon where I usually used to make my hair as a kid, and there was this little girl. She was like 3 or 4, and she had this 4C hair, and they'll do her hair that way. I mean, she cried a ton, but I was like, wow, that is so beautiful. And for me, that was something I was like, you know what? I really, when I grew up, I want to have this 4C hair. I want to keep it because this perming is not doing anything to me. And so that was another thing about like younger Derby. And I'm glad that now I have like my 4C hair, proudly wearing my natural hair with pride. And somebody asked me how tall I am. I am
Yeah.
5'10".
I saw your swimsuit performance and I could see that, your height, like it really helps you, like with your stage presence and everything. And, that was such a wonderful story. I could also relate to it a lot because I think curious young girls and also the ones who have usually watched the Next Top Model and Miss World, like sometimes you don't realize it, but connecting the dots back in hindsight, there's a small part of you that was probably interested. And I want to understand, have you given it any thought that how did or where did this feeling come from that I have to take the road less taken or carve out my own path? Where did that come from?
Oh yeah, I think for me, I don't know, I have some of these innate thoughts because I'm also like a deep thinker. I'm always like reflecting. When the kids are playing, I'm like, no, 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 let me think about the future. That kind of person. And for me, it was also like always thinking about when you think about impact,
Hmm.
what does that look like? I feel like a lot of people think about impact like, oh, I have to change the world, I have to turn things around. But then for me, it was like, what are the little ways you can make impact? And when you think about family, family is so important. Family is not perfect. We can all laugh here and talk about like stories of like, wow, that really hurt me, or that was not what I was expecting. But then family is so critical when I think about community development. Like where do leaders come from? They all came from a family, even if you didn't have a family. So for me, I kind of like thought about it like, how can you spread the
Hmm.
family name? And for you to spread the family name, that means you need to go to places that the family has not been. That means you have to do things that the
So
family has not done. Going to college in the US, like, I mean, my immediate family, I'm the only one who had done that, like, full time. Studying finance in my immediate family, I mean, we have some people in, like, the broader extended family, but I was the first person to do that specifically. Like, my mom did some investment stuff, but, like, to say, like, oh, this was my background. Doing pageants, like, the whole lineage, like, you're the first person. But for me, I found that by doing those different things, not only
hmm.
is that spreading name, but you're opening doors. You're showing people this is possibility is a thing. You can get into different things that you set your mind to. Because to your point, there's some desires we have in our hearts. We don't necessarily know where they come from. But I always tell people, if God gives you a dream, like partner with him to see that dream come to pass. Like explore that dream. There's a verse that I love that says, "It is in the nature of kings," and they say kings to represent kings and queens, but it's in the nature of kings and queens to set a matter of a thing. So if I'm just sitting in my house and I have a thought, I'm like, wow, what it means to be a CEO, or I can see myself as a CEO. Like, don't just stop there. Search, like, what does it take to be a CEO? Who is a CEO? What do I need to do to be on the path of being a CEO? Do I need to work here? That stuff is what other people, that's what 99 other people are not doing. And that's
So
what's going
true.
to make the difference. So that's where my head, some of this stuff is like crazy. I'm just like, whoa, who do you think you are thinking about all of this stuff? But that is how I thought about like that part of the road less traveled. But the thing about it, it's not easy, it's different, it's scary. But I like to say, what do we do with our fear? We run towards them, we don't run away from them. And and that's the beauty of life, because life has ups and downs. But life is beautiful. And the ups and downs makes it beautiful, because by the time you experience both, you're like, wow, life is indeed something. And I think we're all here for an adventure, but it's up to you to choose. Choose the adventure. Some people choose the road that has been traveled. Nothing wrong with that. It's your choice. And some people like us, we're like, hey, let's see what life has to offer. But we understand that comes with risks. We understand we have to do extra. We understand that it may not always be easy. There will be disappointments. There will be rejections. Come on, like rejections, we roll together. But then it doesn't break me because I know that it's beyond the outcome. It's who you're becoming. So I'm gonna stop here to let you ask the next question. But one of the things when I was looking to compete in 2021, and I was still going back and forth. I was like, why don't I want to put myself out there like here? Like, I mean, I will be on the TV, I'll be on the camera, I'll give me the mic, I got you, I'll speak to millions of people. It is my gift. But at the same time, I'm that kind of person that's like, oh, I'm good. I'm just gonna chill on this side. But one of the things that I heard was winning is the cherry on the top. Everybody wants to win a crown. Everybody wants to be Miss Universe. Everybody wants to be Miss USA, Miss India. But it's who you're becoming that is the most important. Because after Miss Universe, after being Miss Universe, after being Miss USA, who are you? That for me was like, wow, I'm here for this. And I'm on that journey of becoming. And that's what makes the path less traveled interesting.
You remind me so much of what Michelle Obama, in fact, also talks about. She keeps talking about the importance of family and how that has started reflecting in, everything that she does for her community around her as well. I want to ask her actually, are you the eldest daughter out of all the four siblings? Are you?
Okay, so this is a great question. I am just the responsible former last born. I used to be a last born for 6 years. Then I have a younger brother who's amazing, who dethroned me from my last born throne. But then I'm the last girl. So I'm actually the fourth child. However, people think I'm the first. No, I'm like 6 years younger than the first child in our family. But then again, it's like life has thrown a lot of punches. You've had a lot of experiences. Like I remember the first time I came to the US, I was probably 14 on my own. It was for a summer holiday. How do you navigate all of that? Like, so I've had very interesting experiences that have prepared me. So people
Yeah.
usually think I'm the first. I'm the fourth child. I'm the last girl. Used to be the last born. But I'm just the responsible fourth child or responsible last
The
girl you find out there.
Exactly. But
That's
because I
why.
can see that the responsible sibling, the person you are at home, like you said, having a crown on your head, but you're still the same person underneath, and it's about the kind of person that you are eventually becoming. And is that why you've written The King's Daughter? It's written in your bio.
Oh, great. So that has nothing to do with pageants or the crown or anything. But I'm gonna explain to you. So I actually stole that. Shout out to my sister Adobe Obani if she's listening. So my sister always had this thing about like the king's daughter. And I adopted it because and the whole idea is I
Hmm.
am a daughter of God and God is my father. So there are gonna be times when your parents cannot fulfill the responsibilities that they want to fulfill, or people that you love dearly may disappoint you, which may be hurtful. But then you have a father who has promised that will never leave you or forsake you, that you are mine. Before you were born, I knew you. I
Hmm.
formed you for a purpose. So that is what the king's daughter is, a reminder like, hey, at the end of the day, before you were anything, before I'm Miss New Jersey, before I'm an employee at JP Morgan, before I am my sibling's sister, before I'm any of the things that society wants to place
Hmm.
on me,
Correct.
I am God's own, which is a precious spot to be on because it's kind of like you're precious to God. God is hugging you. God is taking care of you. God cares, and that is the position. And God is king, so it's royalty. So it kind of like worked out, but it had nothing to do with pageants or Miss New Jersey. It's always been there. So that is why I have that. There's a reminder. I like to put reminders or signals because the world is busy. There's a lot of things happening and we forget that we need reminders. Nobody is superhuman. Nobody like remembers it. That days I wake up, I'm like, oh my god, the world is on top of me as a burden. But then I have to remember I'm made for a purpose. Today is gonna be a great day. Today the Lord orders my steps. Today I inspire somebody. Today I make a change. Look how far you've come. Like you need all those reminders, no matter how good you are. Everybody needs that reminder. No matter how strong you are, no matter if you're like the most successful person, you need that reminder. So for me, that is one of my
That
landmark
is
reminders.
beautiful. In fact, I agree with you. You know, when you, especially when you're a pageant title holder, there are moments where it can feel like the world's weight is on your shoulders and you need something to find comfort in. And for some people, it's something else. For you, it's God. And we all need to find a safe space. And now it made a lot of sense. So when you were telling me your
Mm-hmm.
story, I automatically connected it to your, in fact, bio as well. And I realized that earlier I thought she's talking about her dad. But then in the middle of the interview, I was like, no, I think she's talking about God, and that is the king's daughter. I love that reference.
Yeah.
Now coming to, like a later stage of your life, I read about you obviously, and I know that you were at the top of your class. No surprise there. And that you were scouted by JP Morgan to work in their private bank. So obviously they must have seen something in you. The same thing and the same leadership qualities that perhaps Miss New Jersey USA also saw in you. And how do you really translate those leadership qualities, in the workspace into pageantry? How do you think it helped you? And secondly, most importantly, what do you think young girls need to be doing so that they can also be the leaders of their own lives?
So I think the two worlds are interconnected. Every time I meet people, they're like, "Oh, finance, pageants." Two extreme worlds. They are extreme worlds, but then they're connected. Like you said, there are leadership skills. You're working with, when you think about the workspace, corporate, you're working with people. So you need to learn different leadership styles. You need to learn different personality types. How do I interact with person A versus person B? How do I make a decision on my feet? How do I respond to my manager when he stops me right there and says like, "Hey, how is that work working? How's that work you're doing going?" Instead of saying, can I come back to you in 5 minutes? How do I respond immediately? Think about the pageant world. You, if you make top five, you have to answer in 30 seconds a question that you've never heard before that moment. Or you have to be in interview and you have to communicate clearly in like 2.5 minutes. Or you're dealing with like navigating. In my case, we had like over 119 girls for the pageant weekend. How do you interact with people? How do you walk up to people, most people that you don't know, and say like, "Oh, hey, you look amazing," without it being awkward? They're the same things. It's like communication, it's like leadership. I think the key is looking at the parallels so it doesn't look like two different worlds. They're two different fields, but then the skill sets, the fundamentals are the same. You show up, you have like an intention, you're trying to be relatable, you're trying to inspire. Because at work, you're trying to inspire too. You're trying to like say, "Hey, I have this great idea. Let me inspire my whole team to get on board with me." That's the same thing. And in terms of the young girls, I would say at the end of the day, your life is an opportunity to tell a story. Every day you're telling a story. The question is,
Yeah.
what story are you telling? Who are you telling the story to? And you don't have to be like formulaic about, "Oh, what story am I telling?" You want to be genuine, but you also want to be intentional. You also want to think about like, what kind of experiences do I want to get? And I'm still learning a lot of these things too. I'm always asking myself like, "Hey, what kind of life do you want to live? What dreams do you have? Dream big." Like the big thing that came out of my pageant weekend that I always said is like, dream big. Your dreams are valid. Your dreams are valid, and because they are valid doesn't mean they're going to be easy. They're going to be hard. You're going to have to work for that. Like, are you ready to do that? So I think to young girls, the sky is just the beginning. There is no limitation wherever you are, regardless of where you are. And I know, like, depending on the location you are, there's some physical limitations, there's some physical restrictions. But the mind is where it all starts. I used to be in Nigeria, and I didn't even think, okay, this is crazy. I'm a citizen of the United States. I grew up in Nigeria. I wasn't thinking of coming to the US, even as a citizen. But one of the things one of my sister will say is like, you were here in Nigeria, but the way your mind was, it was beyond Nigeria. Like a lot of times we're like, "Oh, if only I will move to the United States. If only I will move to Philippines. If only I will move here." You can't keep if only your entire life. It's like, what do you have right now? And what can you work with right now? You have your mind. You have, I mean, you have internet, the same internet you use on like TikTok, on Instagram. How can you use that internet to get you to where you're trying to go to? So I would say like dream big, work hard, but you also have to believe in yourself, and you have to realize that you're more than your looks. You're more than what people think. People have said it's crazy when I reflect on high school or I reflect on growing up. Like I just think about some things people may have said to me that were not the best, most fun things, like crazy, cruel things. And I just think about other girls because, like, yes, I experienced that, but other people
Yeah.
also experience that, and it breaks people. It creates insecurities. But I think young girls, I want young girls to look at themselves and say, like, who am I? And not who are you from, like, oh, do I look great? Do I look like the Miss Universe? Do I look, no, who am I on the inside? Who am I? What am I destined to do? And begin to lean into that, because the way the world works too is you shine from the inside. So you can do all the makeup and everything, but if you don't take care of the inside,
Yeah.
you're not gonna shine. And we're all meant to let our light shine. So that's what I'll say. It's gonna be hard work. Let your light shine. Do the work, but also speak positive about yourself. And don't let the words of people that were not like
Yeah.
uplifting weigh you down.
I think what you've said, absolutely right, and I agree with it. A lot of people sometimes come to me because they're lacking motivation. And I keep telling them that I can talk to you, I can give you a pep talk for 30 minutes, an hour, but it's not going to be helpful if you don't actually go back and do the work. And it's actually sometimes disappointing to see people come back after 6 months and then say, how do I work on myself again? So I tell them, you got to have to do the work because hope is not a strategy. You got to, like the CEO dream that you said, it's not going to happen if you just sit and build these castles in your mind, right? So I really wanted to understand, like all the things you said, it does make sense. But then there's this innate quality in you, I feel, that you're okay being disliked. And that's a huge part of the mindset that you need to be really tough from inside, especially when you're going in pageants. So while there are a lot of parallels between finance and pageants, but at the same time, in pageants, so many girls sometimes are told or they feel that if I'm too outspoken or if I voice my opinions, and what if the certain organization doesn't agree with me? And then girls are taught to be grateful, which I think is one of the worst advices to really give someone because that inhibits them from dreaming bigger. Be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for where you've reached, whatever you've achieved. Be nice, be relatable, be personable.
Yeah.
All of those advices, I feel like it has the opposite effect of what it's actually intended to. So, how does a young girl differentiate between
Mm.
these things?
Yeah, I don't think, I think gratitude is a key element anywhere, but then gratitude should not um, take away
Hmm.
your voice. And we're in a world now where it's very easy to be a people pleaser. I just want things to be smooth. I don't want any issues. And there's sometimes you want to go that route. You have to choose your battle. You're not the savior of the world. I am not the savior of the world. I cannot save the entire world. And I do not take that responsibility because I have limitations. But I do think my advice would be you gotta listen in here.
Hmm.
Listen to your heart. You know when you're when you're silencing your voice, and you know when you're not. I don't take up every battle. Like all the battles are not mine. So I don't take up every battle. But then when I know that there's something I have to say, even if it's a question that will make me
Hmm.
think differently, I have to live that fear. Because there's always fear, like, oh my God, what will people say? Not just only about like what you say, how you show up, how you look, how you dress up and everything. And there's so many opinions everywhere. But I always say, as long as you feel aligned within, I think a lot of the things we need
Yeah.
is already inside of us. And you know when something is off, your spirit tells you like something is off. And if people would listen closely, because the world is noisy, so it's very easy to be distracted, then they will be able to pay more attention. So it is hard to be different, to be disliked. But one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda Adichie, who is well known in the United States and across the world, I think she said, "Your job is not to be liked. You're not brought to this world to be liked. You have a role to play, and if you're going to prioritize being liked over the role that you need to play, then you're wasting that opportunity." So that's what I'll tell girls. You need to be bold. We need bold women. We need courageous women. We need people who are willing to share their opinion, their differentiated opinion, even if it's different. And you said something which is very interesting because you're like, oh, it seems like you're not worried about being disliked. It is a huge struggle. I keep going back and forth. I'm like, oh, should I say something here? Should I do this? I do have a dissenting voice in the sense that I may be that one person where everybody's like, oh yes, we agree. And I say, oh, have we thought about this? And it doesn't feel great to be that person that's like, oh, when everybody's like, yay, we came to the end. And you're like, no, have you thought about this one? But I know deep within that is the role I'm meant to play. So I will never tell anybody like live outside of what you're meant to be doing. So lean into that, listen and trust. Because again, your job is not to be liked. That is not a job description of anyone destined for greatness. And if you want to be liked, you can go ahead and you find out that there's always going to be somebody that would dislike you. But
Yeah,
what's the point?
exactly.
That is the way I think
I
about
tell
it.
this to people all the time that when I started my journey and social media, like our generation has dealt with it. The beauty queens from the 90s probably did not really worry about social media opinion of them. And once I read this one sentence, that really made me look at things differently. And it said that if someone's trying to pull you down, it's probably because you're climbing up a ladder. Nobody's gonna pull down someone who's stagnant. And so every time I see some negative comment or there's any opinion of me in general that someone doesn't like me, the only way I coached myself in a way to accept it is that you must be doing something to trigger any emotion. But the fact that you're doing something, at least you're not insignificant. And I would rather be disliked than not be thought about at all. So that is just like a way of life. Um, but yeah, and you talked about this beautiful point. You said, like questions that make people think. That is the one of the responsibilities of a title holder. On that note, I want to ask you, because that is the type of conversation we're having even right now. What do you see as the questions that you would want to raise, or what are the things that you would want people to start thinking about in the next few months, like throughout your reign as Miss New Jersey, USA? What are you planning to
Yeah.
achieve?
I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot, I think, propelling people to really think about what role you have to play. I think we've come to a point where we've seen different difficult times, the pandemic, you've seen gun violence. There's just so many things happening in our society. And it's very easy to say, like, oh, the government, oh, like this and everything. But it's like, what can you do? And everybody has a role to play. So even if you're in school, is there something you should be doing? Because I think most times they're like, oh, I grew up hearing you're the future leaders of tomorrow. Well, tomorrow
Hmm.
is today. Are you ready? So like why I love my generation and we're like, oh, we're working hard, there's innovation, there's technology. Are you getting the skills that you need? If you got into power today, how different would you be from the person that's currently in there? Because it's very easy to criticize than to actually do. I think people don't realize until they get into that shoe, they're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. So those are the kind of conversations I'm looking to have, looking to speak to people, just to get a conversation going, but then to also strike something. So that it's not just another conversation. It's like a conversation that leads to action. And the other thing too that is also big about like what I talk about too is like the financial literacy, but not from a standpoint of like, budgeting, saving. I'm like, yeah, there's a ton of stuff out there. But what are the things that go on in your mind that make you think about money in
Hmm.
a certain way? So if you're like, oh, I really want to be wealthy and stuff like that, but like I hate rich people. Okay, you're not going to be wealthy, even if you have the highest paying job, because money, you're meant to have a relationship with that. So like starting people young, thinking about what does wealth look like? What are assets? Those kind of things, I think is critical. And it goes back to the whole thing about like change making. What role are you going to play? Like identifying your role. If you're meant to be an educator, what path should you be on? If you're struggling with the fact, and there's different people, they're like, oh, I've never seen anybody in my community go this far. Okay, let's have a conversation. And how can you be the first? Or how can you not just only be the first, but you pull a bunch of people around you? What do we need to take the community to the next level? I'm also big on like how do you have sustainable ideas, sustainable businesses, and sustainable
Yeah.
communities. Because that's what we need. Like the pandemic showed you, like community is number one, but we've been doing everything outside of community. How do you come back together? Like, oh, we're trying to like stop certain things. How do we work together? What role do we play? And one of the cool things about this year, you know, winning Miss New Jersey, I was just thinking about the whole process. I had a whole community there. I had a whole community there, like supporting from beginning to the end. I didn't do it on my own, so I can't take the whole credit. And I'm like, that's what life is about, doing life in community. So I'm really hoping to go into all the communities, different communities across New Jersey. New Jersey is a huge state, and drop some footprints of inspiration. And also hope people would take those footprints and make them permanent legacies
Well,
in their own way.
I am definitely looking forward to your work in New Jersey and even beyond that. I'm definitely going to be there in after July. So I hope that, in fact, if I can, yeah, in fact, if I can also contribute on, one of your community programs, I would love to be able to do that. Yeah, so,
Oh, amazing. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
definitely be in touch
definitely.
for sure.
Um,
Yes.
so one of the topics that you were talking about financial literacy and financial independence in general. That's something we've spoken about. A lot of young girls, I think, how do you um, imbibe the feeling from a very young age? I feel girls need to be told more about how important money can be in your life. And I'm not talking about it from a wealth perspective, but rather in a way that, you get more control of your life, you get to make the decisions, and just independence in general. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a person who, as a woman who has in fact worked in the finance field as well, do you see that is there any difference in the perception of men and women? And how can we solve that at the root level?
I think, yeah, definitely differences in terms of how we relate with money. Women are more conservative. Women may like fear, like when it comes to investing, they may have more fears. Like, I don't want
Hmm.
to take risk taking. And some of those things, like, it sort of like makes sense. But I think the biggest thing is a lot of us have been in different money situations from growing up, seeing how our parents worked with money, seeing how our neighbors worked with money. And I think people need to recognize, again, I go back to the whole thing about everything you need for the next level you currently have, whether that's a good or bad thing. In the sense of, if you didn't grow up in an environment where people were financially literate, where people made wise money decisions, your job is not to repeat that, because
Hmm.
that is the default. Your job is to say like, I had this experience and this was the outcome. I'm trying to go here. This is the outcome that I'm looking to expect. What do I do differently? How do you take that experience that you have and then go out there and say, like, what are people doing differently? What can I adopt to change the narrative? And I think when it comes to money, if it comes to like women, especially, that's the case. And that goes back to what I'm really interested in when I think about like financial inclusion, financial literacy. What are the mindsets you
Hmm.
have about money? Why are you nervous about saving? Or why are you all about saving and not actually investing in yourself?
Yeah.
Because money is paper. And that's the other thing too, is like you have to think, when you think about money, when you think about independence, when you think about resources, money is a resource. Money should work for you. And I'm not thinking about like, oh, so many streams of income, but
Hmm.
money shouldn't control you. A lot of us, money controls us. Money is one of the top three stressors in life, in relationships. Why? We're giving money
Yeah.
the power hand here. And for some people, it's just the resources where they found themselves. For some people, you just indirectly,
Hmm.
slowly give money that power. Where you're like, oh my God, it's almost rent time and I don't have the funds. And then you have so much stress and now you're sick and now you have to go to the hospital. Now you have more bills and it's a whole cycle. So I think having people to really sit and say like, what do I
Hmm.
fear the most about money? Like for me, I don't want to have a financial stress. I don't want to be like, oh my God, I don't have enough money. And sometimes I have to confront those feelings. Why do you feel this way? Okay, what's the situation? What is the bill? How much do we have? Have we saved some things? Do we have resources? Who do we know? And when you put it in perspective, you're dealing with triggers. So when something comes up and you have that trigger, you're like, oh, I know why I have this trigger. Let's go back to what we did last time. Because we deal so much with money, this is regardless of gender, that it is crazy that we don't actually take the time to really cultivate a relationship with money. Just like you cultivate a friendship. Right from the day you're born, there's money involved. Like you have to pay the hospital, you have to buy baby food. So at some point you have to go to school, diapers, clothes, money, 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 money. So why is that not included in our curriculum on how to do money and how to make wise decisions? Why is it that people have to be like, oh, I got into debt of like 100K and I had to spend 10 years paying down off. I learned all of this. Here are the lessons I learned so that you cannot make the same mistake. That's cool. But like, why does that person have to go through that rabbit hole to get there? So that's what I think we need. We need to have a relationship with money. And it comes from different things, like asking those tough questions, reading books, and learning from other people. You don't have to. Life is too short for you to say like I want to learn every mistake by myself. That's foolish. It's like who can I learn from that already traveled that same path? So that I cut how much time I meant to spend learning a particular lesson by learning from their lesson.
That's, I think, well put, and definitely something that maybe in the schools of Hoboken we could talk about. Yeah,
Oh yes, 100%. And I'm really like
yeah, because I read about these really creative ways of how you can make students develop a healthy relationship with money. And what you've said, in a way, I have heard this from other people as well, that money has to be a tool and that you need to come from a abundance mindset when it comes to money, when you want to build long-term wealth. Recently, the fun fact, I was reading about this, or perhaps I heard it on a podcast, that these days, just like we have our personality types and we have our sun signs, moon signs, people these days are calculating their money signs and then deciding, how do I, like, if I would want to take investment advice from someone, they're only going to take it if their money sign is the same, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. That's definitely interesting. I've definitely not looked into the money types or signs, but it makes sense because everybody is different. Everybody's like has different habits. There's different things driving our thoughts towards money. And there's this crazy thing, I don't know if I say it wrong, but then, whenever you spend money, apparently the psychologists found that it is the same level. Well, anytime you have to pay a bill, it's the same level of pain as when you have like an injury or something crazy. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, $1,000 off my account. Yeah. So that makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's why I have a headache.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, I think money is just so money is just so, what do you call it? It's just so it's so important that you can't just ignore it. That's what I was saying.
You can't,
You can't ignore money.
So I think we've talked about how the mindset has to be with just your money in your life. Now, one more thing I want to talk to you about this for sure, that this was not your first time competing, right? It was your second time competing for the title of Miss New Jersey, USA. So I really want to know, every time a candidate comes back, and I've seen both of your performances, 2021 and 23, and I could see like in 2023 you came like a queen. It was just, you were a standout winner on stage. I was like, there's no way she's not winning.
Yeah.
What did you do in those 2 years that really brought out that queen energy? And how do you plan on taking it to Miss USA as well? Because I can't wait to see you on that stage.
I'm excited for Miss USA. I think it's going to be so much fun. I think in 2023, honestly, I actually prepared for. I know this is an anomaly, and people in the pageant world will not believe this, but I prepared for Miss New Jersey in 7 weeks, pretty much. But I'm also the same person that will tell you every day is the preparation. Some people say you've been preparing all your life, but like really 7 active weeks, and I was working full time, took no days off. Intense, but worth it. What did I do differently? I think one of my mentors said the first year, go and see what this is about. You're new to this. You're not going to win. She said that. Go and see what this is about and come back. And that was great advice. It didn't sound like great advice in the first year in 2021, but that was like amazing advice. Because if you're going to walk into a different thing, something that you're not used to, it is wise to want to learn how does this work instead of just like jumping in and just going to just see and do whatever it is. So that was like a good advice for me. And then I came in 2023. A lot of it was understanding who I was. Not that I didn't understand who I was in 2021, but recognizing that I have a role to play here. I belong here, and I'm here to showcase my best self. Not my perfect self, but my best self, and to show people like beauty looks like different things, and it's not just only one part of it. And I have a story to tell. I've been working on so many amazing things. There are people who need to hear these stories, from the judges to the girls, hearing different people. So I really leaned on that, and I was leaned on being authentic. So I wasn't trying to do anything crazy. I mean, the styling changed, but those are things I would wear on a regular day. The hair also like changed. It was still my natural hair. On the focus too, and everything. So everything kind of like just um worked out well. But I was really trying to bring myself, my true best self, on stage. But I put in the work. I spent a lot of time practicing. I spent a lot of time going back to what I did in 2021 and say, like, what would you do differently? Like, if you were a judge, what would you do differently? How would you elevate this? What would you change? Because again, everything is all part of a journey. Like, so it's not like, oh, 2021, throw that away. It's like, no, this was part of the journey of evolution. So those are the things I really focused on. And even that pageant weekend, I was there to have a good time too. You're putting in all this work, you're putting all these hours of work. Now it's time to showcase. And then where that takes you. So that was the journey.
I think preparation, of course, it was definitely reflecting in your performance as well. But yeah, I think the last piece of advice that you said, and it really must have taken the pressure off, especially for someone who's competing for a second time, that, you know, just go and see what it's about. And that always is something that we need to remember as well, that you can prepare all you want, but when you're on that stage, I could see that, you know, your natural hair is like one of my most favorite things about your performance. Although you kept it natural even in 2021, but there was a different confidence with which you carried it this time on stage, and your fitness.
Yeah.
I think your body looked amazing in the swimwear round as well. So yeah, and I think, I mean, if you keep on this track of growth, I don't think I need to guess like who's going to be Miss USA. Really looking forward to your time there. And also, you're putting in all of the community work, the pageant prep, and you are just such a self-aware person. There are so many moments when you know, just like even the story that you mentioned, the 3-4-year-old girl in the salon, and how that was such an inspiring moment. I think that just, you painted that picture in my mind. It's never going to go away now. And those are some beautiful moments. And that's exactly the type of girls we want to impact and influence through these platforms.
Right. And the other thing I was going to say too is the mindset too that I went in with this year was leave no crumbs on the table. Because again, there are a lot of girls competing, and this also is going to be the same for Miss USA. There's going to be 51 amazing girls. The class is growing, and it's so exciting. But for me, it was like, do your very best. As long as you can look back and say, I did my best, I wouldn't change anything. That is all that matters. Because it's very easy to try and say, like, oh, you know, I want to win the crown, I want to be this and that, and then you have a sense of disappointment. Because what if you don't win? That is a possibility. So that was also something that changed the spectrum for me. So that helped me focus on me. Because there's a lot happening during competition. And you miss it when you focus on other things happening versus yourself.
Yeah, you got to create that bubble and minimize the regret. That is at least my motto for life. And I think we've synced on that as well. Either you're going to fail or you're going to regret not having tried. So I love the way that you are approaching this. And Ravi, I wish you all the very, very best for Miss USA. Keep up the amazing work, and I hope I can meet you in person, in fact, in July, and probably help contribute to your, you know, community work as well in some way.
Thank you so much. And of course, let me know when you're in town.
Definitely. I wish you all the very best. And thank you so much for coming on board today.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I hope your viewers, you know, take something out of this. Super excited. Thank you. I can't wait to see your future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe people do want to know, how tall are you? Yes.
5'10".
Dervy is 5'10", and you will see her competing for the crown of Miss USA very soon, later this year. So send her all the positive wishes and good vibes, and we'll all be rooting for you.
Thank
You too.
you.
Have an
Take
amazing
care.
Sunday. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining this episode of the Conquer podcast. I hope you guys had a good time. And yeah, thank you so much for wrapping up your weekend with us on this beautiful note.